I'm going to talk about upper ear projects or ear projects, sometimes constellation piercings. Everything you should probably know before you get it done. Very brief video, giving you just the basics. Coming up next on Consultations by a Piercer, episode number 6. So you might want to stick around. For those that are new to the channel, first off, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. I hope you're enjoying the videos, hoping you're finding them helpful and useful. But you may not know who I am. Just to let you know that, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So this is kind of a blanket video of ear projects. Ear projects, I guess, mostly kind of concentrate on this flat area of your upper ear. However, they can be a combination of a lot of different piercings, snugs, conches, helix piercings, outer helix, forward helix, trachea, even lobe piercings. It's where you do a number of piercings to kind of create a new pattern using different types of jewelry to kind of accent one another. It's more of a curated kind of situation and usually a collaborative thing that you do between you and your piercer. Healing time on these can vary greatly. Each individual piercing, depending on where it's at, can range in healing from 2 months if you're really healthy and lucky, up to 6 months to a year, depending on which piercing it is. But usually on these, I generally suggest about 3 to 6 months and taking a break, like 3 at a time, and then waiting 3 months, then doing 3 at a time, up to 3 at a time. You don't want to have multiple piercings healing at one time, mainly because having too many of them is kind of like dying from 1,000 cuts. You are basically making your body work so hard that if it's having issues healing one of those piercings, you have this combination of limited resources and added stress that can prolong the healing period on all of them. As far as basic care, you're going to clean this twice a day using a sterile saline spray. I like Nelman's Piercing Aftercare. Wound wash versions can work. It just needs to be a sterile saline. I suggest in a can, and it should have no other additives. Only sodium chloride and water, nothing else. You want to do that twice daily. Also, I do suggest rinsing under running water at least once a day at the end of your shower, not only to remove any shampoo residue or soap, but also to cut down the likelihood or cut down the amount of discharge is collecting on the jewelry. Kind of helps to melt it away and get rid of it. Of course, you're going to have to practice cross-contamination. Common sense things. Wash your hands before you handle it. No oral contact or exchange of bodily fluids on or around the piercing. Keep your environment clean. Clothing, bedding, towels, anything that may come in contact with the area needs to be cleaned on a regular basis or avoid contact. Do not submerge the piercing in a body of water that you cannot control the quality of, which is pretty much everything but your own clean bathtub. Keep pets away from the bed, away from it. Don't let them sleep in the bed, especially smaller animals that really like to sleep up by your face, right next to your ear and your healing piercing. Avoid contact with unclean objects, things like telephones, headphones, earbuds, all that stuff, either adding pressure to the piercing or trauma, but also we're concerned about how contaminated they may be. Don't share those type of items with other people. Lastly, avoid contact with wet hair. Make sure that your hair is up and completely dry before you let it down and let it have a contact with that new healing piercing. Now let's talk about trauma, pressure, and abuse. Do not sleep on the piercing. Make sure you're sleeping on the other side of your back or figure out a way to elevate the piercings off the bed so they have no contact. Probably the most common way to do that is to purchase one of those U-shaped travel pillows, put a clean sock on it, and sleep in the center of the donut, so to speak. We already covered headphones and so forth, but avoid tight-fitting objects. Headphones, helmets, anything that's going to put pressure on those piercings during the healing process is going to cause trauma, which can prolong your healing period, lead to possible issues like piercing bumps, all that pressure and agitation and movement of the jewelry does cause issues. So they kind of need to be left alone and isolated. They are in the forbidden zone. Don't spin, rotate, or move the jewelry. I know at some point in your life you're probably told by a retail outlet personnel, customer, clerk, I don't know, to spin, rotate, and move jewelry during the healing process, or it was become permanently stuck there. No. The type of jewelry we use is not going to do that, and constant movement and agitation of the piercing is going to lead to problems. If you're wearing a mask, if the mask comes in contact with the piercing in any way, shape, or form, you do want to replace it or clean them every time. Put a new one on a regular basis. When removing the mask, be very cautious that you are not hooking the strings on any of the piercings. Other option is, if you have to require to wear one on a regular basis, is get the ear savers. They're a little clip that goes in the back that kind of pulls those strings away from your ears. Now let's talk a little bit about jewelry. Jewelry can be threaded or threadless, barbell posts or labret posts. Personally, if we're doing flats, I prefer the labret studs. They have a lower profile, less likely to get caught on things, and etc. You're probably going to find some other piercings, though, it's not going to be the best option. Like if you're doing a rook in this combination, you're going to need something that's curved. So it's going to be one of those other styles of jewelry. Rings are not your best option in most cases to initially pierce with. There are some exceptions, like the Dave piercing. But initially, most things should be done with a standard post. Once the piercing heals, if that's your envision, wear a ring in it, then you want to give it a lot of time, 6 months to a year, to strengthen and season to the point where switching out to curved jewelry or circular jewelry isn't going to cause an issue. The biggest thing with threaded ends and even threadless ends, they do need to be checked on a regular basis. Threaded, of course, you want to make sure they're on there tight. Threadless, you just kind of make sure that they're seated. Grab both, or just kind of squeeze them together, kind of like I'm squishing. Yeah, squeeze them together just to make sure they're well seated. Downsizing. With any or upper ear cartilage piercing, there's going to probably be some swelling involved. So that means that we do oversize the jewelry on purpose to make it make sure there's enough room there for the swelling. They are going to need to be downsized. I usually suggest downsizing like an upper ear helix area in roughly about 4 to 6 weeks. Leaving that longer one in there, especially if you're going for patterns where things match and there's straight lines and so forth, it's important that you downsize quickly, because if you leave that longer post in there, it's going to be more likely to kind of tip and turn and possibly migrate out of place. The thing about downsizing, though, is you do want to have your piercer do it. It's not something you want to do at home, especially if you don't have the proper tools and the proper sizing. It's best to go in and let your piercer do it. In most cases, they'll be happy to do it because they want that thing to pierce, especially if they've done like perfect straight alignments. They are definitely going to want to downsize that jewelry and see how it's healing. Now let's talk about anatomy. With anatomy, we basically place the jewelry in, or the piercings into the anatomy. With this style of piercing, if we're doing like a massive, like maybe 5 or 6 piercings or 3 or 4 piercings in the upper ear, we'll usually start with a centerpiece and then build out there and work it into the shape of the area. If it's perfectly flat, it's kind of easy, but a lot of us have that kind of curved or folded ear, and that can be a little more complicated, but you can do it in a way that it can, those ridges and edges and heels and valleys, where you can make it kind of fit in and flow with the ear. So it really comes down to what you can get and what type of design has a lot to do with what your anatomy looks like. And this is one of the reasons why I suggest that when you do go in and have that initial consultation and maybe that first 3 piercings or so, that you have the piercer mark out everything. Let's plan everything out at once. And then you have them take a picture with your cell phone of the markings, maybe a couple ones to be on the safe side. That way you have an understanding of what that clear initial vision was and how it's going to fit into your ear. And when you come back in 3 or 4 months, you're not both sitting there going, what were we going to do with these other 2? And where was that supposed to be? Having that reference, especially in a large volume shop where they're seeing customers on a regular basis, is very important in some cases, or most cases, actually. Things to consider. Usually 3 at a time is the max your body can stand. 2 is fine. 1 is fine. You don't have to do them all at once. It can be dictated how the project progresses on your budget. If you are a little bit on the don't have a lot of free cash, maybe doing 2 is a better option than doing 3. Just take your time. Look at this as a long-term goal, much in the same way you would look if you came into a tattoo shop and said, I want to get a sleeve. Well, they're not going to tattoo the whole sleeve. They're probably going to do sections of it over a long period of time. Ear projects are basically the same way. As I mentioned before, take a photo, map out, plan in advance. It's much easier to go back to that reference than to try to rethink everything and try to make it fit. And you may not like the results. Also, don't be afraid in the process to say to your piercer, I kind of want to, I think maybe this should change a little bit. And collaborate with them and find that perfect fit for what you're doing. Another thing to mention during marking or before marking or during the consultation is what your end goal is as far as jewelry, the type, the size, the type of setting that you might be using. Do you want to switch out those threadless ends on a regular basis or threaded ends to give yourself maybe some gem clusters here, or maybe you want to do something a little in one of the bars or something. Let's talk about all this stuff in advance because it's much easier to plan than it is to go backpedal and try to make things fit. Now, a couple other things. If you're going on vacation, it might be best to delay it until you come back. There's a lot of reasons for this, and I won't go into them all now, but healing a piercing on vacation is just not the best option. If you are involved in any type of organized sports or organized events or competitions, dance, drama, what have you, and they're going to require you to remove the jewelry, it is not something I advise during the healing process. You should check on these things beforehand, talk to whoever's in charge, and find out if you're going to be able to wear the jewelry through the whatever you're doing, or if you're going to have to remove it. If you're going to have to remove it, you need to wait until you're either done with that or have at least a long break in it where you could possibly put some retainers in. When you're dealing with multiple piercings in the upper ear especially, it's just not going to be fun to be taking 4 or 5 pieces of jewelry out every time you have to go to a game. Just to let you know that in advance. Might be something you want to wait for until you're pretty much retired from that type of activity. Big thing, sleep and isolate. Sleep and isolate. The thing is you do not want to sleep on this piercing. They will trick you. Or ears are notorious for this. I'm feeling great. They're healing wonderful. And you go, I'll give it a shot. And then the next day you wake up and it's 3 times its normal size and it hurts and it feels like it just was pierced. Isolate these piercings, especially when sleeping. And as I kind of alluded to before, what your placement is will dictate exactly what jewelry you can wear in the future. So always keep that in mind when you're choosing jewelry, when you're choosing the placement, especially when you're planning out a project, is if there's not room there, there's not room there. So you really need to plan these things out and talk to your piercer about exactly what your end goals are. Well, that's all I have to say on that today. Check out our merch store, links in the description. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, comment, do all that fun stuff. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.